The first and most visible warning sign that we're entering a permanent crisis is the persistent and worsening disruption of global supply chains. This isn't just about the occasional item missing from store shelves. It's about a deep, systemic unraveling of the logistical web that once allowed modern life to run smoothly. Over the past few years, we've seen wave after wave of shortages. It began with panic, buying during the pandemic, but what followed proved far more troubling. Items like baby formula, prescription drugs, computer chips, vehicle parts, basic grains, and even clean drinking water in some areas have become harder to access, not just for weeks, but for months and even years in some cases. What once were short-term supply hiccups are now turning into long-term constraints. Manufacturers can't get raw materials on time. Trucking and shipping industries are under pressure due to fuel costs, labor shortages, and regulatory burdens. Warehouses sit half full because products are delayed at ports or never produced at all due to upstream disruptions. Every link in the chain is weaker than it used to be, and that fragility spreads quickly. And the truth is, the modern economy is built on razor-thin margins and just-in-time delivery systems that cannot absorb prolonged shocks. Even more concerning is how these breakdowns ripple through daily life. A shortage of one small component can halt the production of an entire category of goods. A delay in food transport can lead to spoilage and skyrocketing grocery prices. Pharmacies now regularly experience backorders on life-saving medications. When people can't reliably get what they need, panic begins to set in, and that panic, over time, erodes trust in systems meant to support society. For individuals, this means being caught off guard again and again. Families who assumed essentials would always be available are now reconsidering how they stock their pantries. Hospitals are forced to ration care when supplies dwindle. Farmers can't get fertilizer or animal feed. It's a domino effect that's no longer a far-off possibility. It's already happening. The permanence of these issues becomes clear when you realize that many companies and governments are no longer promising a return to normal. Instead, they're quietly adjusting to this new normal. Prices remain high. Availability remains inconsistent, and we're expected to adapt. This isn't just a phase. It's the beginning of a sustained period where scarcity becomes a fact of life. Those who see this for what it is and prepare accordingly will have a critical edge in the years ahead. The second clear warning sign that we're entering a permanent crisis is the breakdown of public trust in institutions. When people no longer believe in the systems designed to protect, inform, and guide them, society begins to fracture. This erosion of trust is widespread. Governments, media outlets, financial institutions, health organizations, law enforcement, and even educational systems are all experiencing a historic loss of credibility. And it's not just skepticism anymore, it's outright rejection. Decades ago, citizens may have disagreed with their leaders or questioned the media, but there was still a fundamental belief that these institutions were working in the public's best interest. Today, that belief is gone. Politicians are seen as corrupt and self-serving. News outlets are viewed as biased mouthpieces for hidden agendas. Central banks are accused of manipulating markets and destroying savings. Health agencies have lost credibility due to conflicting guidance and politicized decisions. The result is a population that no longer looks to institutions for answers, but rather seeks information from fragmented, often unreliable alternative sources. This collapse in trust is dangerous. In a crisis, people need guidance, coordination, and a sense of shared purpose. But when trust is gone, chaos takes its place. Public safety directives are ignored. Economic policies are resisted, health advice is questioned or outright rejected, and instead of cooperation, we see division, citizens turning on each other, groups polarizing, and communities fracturing into distrustful camps. In the absence of reliable leadership, people begin to act independently. Some prepare quietly, others protest loudly. Some build community resilience while others exploit the instability. But the one constant is that people stop relying on traditional systems and start relying on themselves or smaller, insular groups. This may seem empowering in the short term, but in the long term, it signals the breakdown of the social contract that holds civilization together. We've entered an era where perception matters more than truth. If people believe the system is broken, they act accordingly, even if parts of it still function. That belief alone fuels panic, hoarding, disengagement from civic life, and, in extreme cases, violence. And the scary part, once trust is lost, it rarely returns. No government press release, corporate rebranding, or fact-checking campaign can rebuild it overnight. This is why the breakdown of public trust is such a critical warning sign. It signals that the glue holding society together is dissolving. The longer this continues, the harder it will be to navigate crises in the future. And for those paying attention, it's time to start building parallel systems of trust within families, communities, and networks that can weather the storm. The third warning sign that we're entering a permanent crisis is the normalization of emergency conditions. What used to be rare and alarming has now become routine. Rolling blackouts, inflation surges, food shortages, civil unrest, digital censorship, and even lockdowns are no longer shocking. They are just part of the new normal, and that's exactly the problem. When people stop reacting to emergencies as emergencies, they begin to adapt to dysfunction instead of resisting or correcting it. In past generations, a fuel shortage or a major supply chain collapse would have made national headlines for weeks. Now, such events are buried under newer, more pressing disasters. The public barely blinks. Society has developed crisis fatigue, where people are so used to disruption that they've stopped preparing for it and started tolerating it. But what happens when we no longer expect stability? What happens when we stop believing things will get better? This shift in mindset is dangerous. It breeds apathy, reduces resilience, and signals a deeper systemic breakdown. People begin to lower their expectations, not just for government or the economy, but for their own lives. They expect less safety, less freedom, less prosperity, and less truth. In return, they accept more control, more surveillance, more propaganda, and more shortages. Bit by bit, the conditions of a prolonged crisis become the background of everyday life. And here's where the danger escalates. Power structures thrive in a state of permanent emergency. Crises justify expanded authority, endless executive powers, and the erosion of rights under the guise of protection. We've seen it time and again. Policies introduced as temporary measures during a crisis quietly become permanent. Surveillance tech rolled out during health emergencies stays in place. Financial controls created during economic crashes remain in the system. Borders closed for one reason are never fully reopened. And the people, overwhelmed and exhausted, stop fighting back. When emergencies become a lifestyle, you no longer live in a free or stable society. You live in a managed decline, one where the systems are kept on life support by control rather than progress. You're not rebuilding, you're just surviving, and that's the clearest signal of a permanent crisis, a society that forgets what normal ever felt like. If we're going to break out of this spiral, we must first recognize that normal doesn't return on its own. It has to be rebuilt intentionally and locally. Waiting for top-down solutions is a trap. Instead, individuals and communities must start building the foundations of a parallel system, one that doesn't depend on dysfunctional institutions, but on skills, relationships, and truth. The fourth warning sign that we're entering a permanent crisis is the growing divide between the ruling class and the everyday person. This isn't just about wealth inequality, though that is a major factor. It's about how disconnected leadership has become from the struggles of ordinary people. Elites, whether in politics, media, finance, or tech, increasingly live in a different world, one protected, insulated, and buffered from the consequences of the policies they promote or the systems they control. While regular people are battling inflation at the grocery store, supply shortages at the hardware store, and rising crime on their streets, those at the top enjoy security details, private schools, and gated communities. They fly over the chaos in private jets, speak from climate summits about carbon reduction, and then return to lives completely untouched by the very crises affecting the rest of society. This two-tiered existence is a recipe for permanent instability, because when trust in leadership evaporates, people begin to abandon the system altogether. This divide isn't just physical, it's ideological. The narratives pushed by mainstream institutions often seem completely out of touch with what people are actually experiencing. While the media might insist everything is under control, real people see store shelves empty, wages stagnant, and basic freedoms eroding. While politicians celebrate economic recovery, citizens struggle to pay rent and medical bills. When those in power deny the reality on the ground, resentment builds, and when that resentment reaches a boiling point, social cohesion breaks down. We are also witnessing the erosion of accountability. During previous decades, leaders were at least expected to answer for their failures. Today, disastrous decisions, whether economic, geopolitical, or public health related, rarely lead to consequences for those responsible. Instead, power is recycled between the same institutions, while the public is told to adapt. This immunity from responsibility deepens the sense that the system is rigged, and once enough people believe that, they stop participating in it. In a functional society, leaders are expected to serve the people. In a society drifting toward permanent crisis, leadership becomes about control, narrative shaping, and self-preservation. The people are no longer viewed as citizens with rights, but as problems to be managed. This shift is subtle at first, policies wrapped in safety or equity, but eventually it becomes clear the rules are different for them. A civilization where the elite thrive while the masses suffer is not sustainable. That's not pessimism, it's history, and if we want to avoid collapse, we must close the gap. That doesn't mean waiting for them to fix it. It means building communities, networks, and local systems that make their power irrelevant. Because the future doesn't belong to the insulated, it belongs to the prepared. The fifth warning sign we're entering a permanent crisis is the normalization of emergency powers and the erosion of civil liberties. When governments begin to treat temporary measures as permanent tools, it's a clear sign that society is moving toward authoritarian control under the guise of safety and order. We've seen it before. Emergencies are declared, powers are expanded, freedoms are suspended, and then, long after the crisis ends, those powers never fully go away. Throughout history, nations have used real or manufactured emergencies to bypass the normal checks and balances of democracy. What begins as a response to a legitimate threat, like terrorism, pandemics, or unrest, often becomes a gateway to sweeping surveillance, censorship, and control. The danger lies not in the crisis itself, but in how it's used to reshape society. When laws are rushed through without debate, when speech is silenced in the name of misinformation, and when dissent is criminalized, we're no longer operating in a free society. We're operating in a managed one. We've grown used to seeing headlines like "Government extends emergency measures" or "New surveillance tools to monitor public safety." These headlines used to be alarming. Now they're background noise. That's the problem. When society gets comfortable with being watched, restricted, or manipulated, those who crave power are emboldened to push further. Freedoms are rarely taken all at once. They are chipped away slowly under the radar until people wake up in a world that no longer resembles the one they grew up in. It's not just about what governments do, but how society reacts. When citizens willingly give up rights for the illusion of security, when fear overrides reason, and when obedience is mistaken for virtue, tyranny gains a foothold, and once it's in place, it's hard to reverse. Emergency powers often come with no sunset clause. They expand bureaucracy, empower unelected officials, and create legal gray zones where abuse thrives. Some might argue, if you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to worry about. But that's a dangerous mindset. Freedom isn't just about protecting the innocent. It's about ensuring that no one has unchecked authority to decide who is wrong in the first place. In times of crisis, the definition of wrong can shift rapidly, targeting political opponents, protesters, or even average citizens who ask too many questions. If a society can't return to normal after a crisis, it's not really recovering, it's transforming. And not always for the better. The preservation of liberty, even in difficult times, is the true test of a resilient nation. When we stop demanding that test, we've already failed it. The sixth and final warning sign that we are entering a permanent crisis is the widespread breakdown of trust. Trust in institutions, in media, in leadership, and even in one another. When people no longer believe the systems they depend on are fair, truthful, or working in their best interest, society begins to fracture. This loss of trust doesn't happen overnight. It erodes slowly, fed by corruption, incompetence, misinformation, and betrayal. Think about how many times over the past decade you've heard someone say, "I don't trust the news anymore," or "politicians only care about themselves," or "the system is rigged." These aren't fringe opinions, they've become mainstream. And when trust disappears, so does the glue that holds society together. People stop following rules because they don't believe in the reasons behind them. They stop voting because they think it won't matter. They stop helping others because they fear being taken advantage of. This breeds cynicism, division, and eventually chaos. One of the most dangerous outcomes of lost trust is the rise of tribalism. People retreat into echo chambers, online, politically, culturally, surrounding themselves only with those who think and act like them. Civil debate is replaced with hostility. The assumption of good faith is gone. Now, everyone outside your group is seen as the enemy. That's when society becomes ungovernable and radical voices become the loudest ones in the room. Leaders, whether in politics, business, or media, have played a major role in this breakdown. When they lie without consequence, when they shift blame instead of accepting responsibility, and when they exploit division instead of promoting unity, the public becomes disillusioned. Once lost, trust is incredibly hard to rebuild. People start believing in conspiracy theories because they feel more honest than official statements. They stop preparing for a better future and start bracing for collapse. This is the environment where permanent crisis thrives. Without trust, even well-intentioned solutions are met with suspicion. Vaccines become controversial, weather warnings are ignored, elections are questioned, experts are mocked. Every event becomes politicized, every motive doubted, and every action second-guessed. In such a climate, a coordinated national response to any emergency, economic, environmental, or social, is almost impossible. To reverse this trend, rebuilding trust has to be a priority. That means transparency, accountability, and consistency at every level, from government offices to neighborhood communities. It means being honest even when the truth is uncomfortable. It means listening as much as speaking. But most of all, it means recognizing that without trust, we're not just divided, we're vulnerable. And in a permanent crisis, vulnerability is a luxury no one can afford.